Well, look who's back. Adam Mares returns for a special edition crossover between All Cities DNVR and Locked On Nuggets. This is world's finest.
You are Locked On Nuggets, your daily Denver Nuggets podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to Locked On Nuggets, your daily Denver Nuggets podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thanks for joining us and making us part of your day, being with us Monday through Friday, being an everydayer, and hanging out with us all throughout the week. We are glad that you guys decided to join us. Want to let you know that you can catch the Locked On Nuggets newsletter daily at lockedondaily.com. We've got great content up after every Nuggets game. Ryan was kind enough to do the 10-piece last night after the win over the Los Angeles Clippers. You can check that out. I'm going to give you some insights into some of the stats while Jokic has been out. All sorts of stuff on there. Make sure to check it out at lockedondaily.com. 5-star reviews are appreciated. Go to youtube.com/LockedOnNuggets and hit the like and subscribe button. We passed 8,500. We're screaming towards 9,000. We're almost there. All right, I'm going to stop screwing around. My guest today, I can't believe he's a guest, returning.
That's weird.
The returning conquering hero, senior data specialist for senior director of DNVR, Adam Mares, host of All Cities NBA, host of DNVR Nuggets, host of all sorts of great things. Appeared on Altitude the other day. Look at you going on Altitude. Welcome back, man.
Thanks so much, man. You look great. Look at this. Look at us, man. I feel like we're looking good today.
I got dressed for you. I didn't just I didn't wear my workout hoodie for you. On today's show, we're going to talk about last segment. Are the Nuggets title hopes alive or not so much? We're going to talk about how to shape the Nuggets roster going forward. Adam's got some really interesting thoughts. He's already told me on that. Excited to get into those. But we're going to start first segment here. Adam, I don't know if you remember this, but we do 3 segments on this show.
That's right.
We're going to start with this. Nikola Jokic is your new scoring leader after Giannis Antetokounmpo last night dipped a little bit down, and now Joker is the scoring leader. He is second in rebounds, and I believe 4th in assists per game. An unbelievable season from him continues. But my bigger thing is, as somebody that has seen the width and breadth of Jokic's career and has understood his career better than I think than any person out there, I will ask you, did you ever think you'd see a day where Joker was leading the league in scoring?
Absolutely not. That's part of what makes it so fun. You know, we always wondered. I think Jokic's an ethical hooper. I know that's kind of a cliche, but I really don't think he thinks about those types of things like, I can score a little bit more here. But the team calls for it. And we always wondered, what would it look like if Jokic turned the scoring dial all the way up? And I think that's part of it. He's turned the scoring dial up a lot. He's more aggressive than ever. He's hitting the 3-point shot. That's a big part of it. But really, in my opinion, the scoring is a lot about Russell Westbrook, and what he does well is set the table for Jokic, and that table, getting those shots in the paint, those little jump hooks off of the rolls, those are really important for the team right now to make Westbrook viable and to make him super impactful. And he's been doing it. So I love it. I never thought I would see it. And we're really seeing the way Jokic can extend parts of his games we didn't even realize he could extend, and he's extending them in a major way. And if he gets the scoring title, Matt, I know it's early to talk about legacies. He's never talked about as one of the all-time great scorers, ever. But if you win a scoring title, you're automatically in that conversation. I'm not saying he's the greatest scorer, but automatically you have to say, look, this guy was capable of being the best scorer in the league in any given season. And that would be a huge, just sort of like legacy mark.
I think in combination with everything else that he's accomplished, I think you're absolutely right. Because otherwise, it's like he joins such luminaries as Bradley Beal and and some other guys that have gotten there. But I do think when you look at it from the combination of things, and I do apologize, he is 2nd in assists, 3rd in rebounds. That's the correct stat function.
That's
where
crazy.
He's at, which I just can't. I mean, so I'm not trying to rush the conversation. We have time on the whole MVP thing, but one of the reasons I'm really excited about it is I do think it's legitimately going to be, it can wind up as a really fascinating argument, because I think this looks right now. He got off to the best start in NBA history. He had, I said it when he was 19 games in, I was like, this is the best 19 games anyone's ever played. We're 35 plus games in, and this is the best anybody has ever played in terms of production crossed with efficiency, crossed with impact. Like, from a just number standpoint, this is the best NBA season individually in history so far. And I know that's going to be controversial. I don't know how you argue against it, because you could say usually it's like, well, yeah, okay, he failed the box score because his usage was high, but he wasn't efficient and the team didn't win. Nope. The impact's there. The efficiency is there, and the team is still hanging around at the top of the Western Conference standings. Like, there's a very good chance that this winds up. It's so difficult to keep this up for another 50 games, but 40 plus games. But if he does, I think this goes down as maybe the best individual season in NBA history.
Well, first of all, I'm not so sure that he'll slow down, because I really do think it's largely a function of the Westbrook piece of this, and I think that he'll continue to get these easy buckets. Does that mean he'll stay number one? I think he's up by like 0.2 points, so he might not stay number one. You fall to third in scoring, but the numbers the same, and it's like, that wasn't impressive. It's kind of ridiculous, but you're leading me into something that's going to make everybody kick me back off the show, Matt. You're going to make it, and I'm not even kidding about this, and I mean it sincerely. You and I have different takes on the MVP, how you evaluate it, how you vote for it. You're almost looking at it when you talk about this in a vacuum. I know you don't. I know you could take other things into consideration. I think Yoke's the best player, and I think he's probably having the best season, although there's a couple guys playing really well. The reason I have said, and people got upset about this, that if you are too far down in the standings and there are other people who deserve it, the year that he won it when he was sixth, I don't think anybody else deserved it. So to me, it was like, all right, well then throw that out. And the number was so close that it was like, hey, he won 2 more games there with the 2 seed. Like, come on, what are we doing? But what the Thunder are doing and what they're on pace to accomplish, and you can put the Cavs in there if you see an MVP candidate there. I don't, but you could make that argument. If they finish with such a better record than Denver, and if Denver finishes in the standings below a certain threshold, if they're, fourth or something in the standings, to me, I think it absolutely should be considered and might even be disqualifying. And I know people will say that's insane. It's the team. It's this or that. While I agree and I feel confident about that, I still think there's something about team wins that are important that I don't think we capture or quantify. And years down the line, we might actually see something and be like, well, how did we do that? They had 20 fewer wins than this other team. And those things matter. Winning to me is more important than anything else. It's about wins. So I do look at this and I say Shea is having an MVP-worthy season. And if they finish 15 games ahead of Denver, and Denver is far enough down in the standings, no matter how good Jokic has been, I still think that should be taken into consideration. And I'm a Jokic guy. But I think that winning has to take precedent. And I don't want this to be a thing where every year for the next 20 years, we're like, that 7 seed, though, look at statistically. I'm sorry. Even though I think Jokic the best player, I think it should be heavily considered. And so I just put that out there, even though I know it's going to be supremely unpopular.
Well, I think it's like a really great question. And I'm actually, there's a little part of me that's really excited to get into this when we get to March, because this is the question I posed is, if Shai Gilgeous-Alexander averages 30, is second in steals for a team that wins 70 plus games, can he really not be MVP? Versus if Nikola Jokic averages all of these numbers that he's averaging and they win 50 plus games, can he really not be MVP? And like that gap, I think, is fascinating, because that's a very, how do you feel about it question. Like that's an interesting question to me, right? Talking about injuries and all the other things is where I start to be like, I'm not really interested in talking about that, because you're talking about counterfactuals. But when we have 2 great sets of facts for both players and you're trying to weigh them against each other, that's the kind of stuff that made me start caring about this in the first place, of actually being really interested in this discourse, in this conversation, and in these ideas about, you mentioned like the history component of it, of like, if we all acknowledge, like I've said this forever, the number one reason that pro sports exists is money. The second reason is winning. Like you want to compete and you want to win games. And if winning matters, then how much you win and how much you win by needs to matter. And those 2 things I think are really important to the conversation.
And real quick, Robert Rodarte, he says, so the best player on the best team would be the argument. My thing, it's not that reductive. I don't think we should just do this of like, you have to be a top 3 seed and then we pick one from those 6 teams. I don't think it's that reductive. What I'm saying is you have to factor that in. And what the Thunder are doing, and what Shai is the biggest piece of that, is really important context, that he provides something for that team that maybe it isn't nothing. Maybe it is just that the team is great, but you have to weigh it and say, if winning matters, and he's doing the MVP stuff for his team and they're winning at such a high rate, it should be factored in. Where you fall in that, there'll be disagreement. I hope there's disagreement. I think there's too much uniformity right now and consensus in the MVP voting. I'm just saying, I don't think we can throw this out and say, oh, don't look at record. It's the team that's that. Winning matters. And there's so many different ways to get your team to win, and we don't capture them all.
By the way, just wrapping up on Yoke, congrats to him for once again leading in the second round of All-Star returns. He is the leading vote getter in the Western Conference. So congrats to Nikola Jokic. I'm sure he's still as excited as he was the last time when he said, quote, thanks, I guess. Up next, we'll
hold up. Before you move on, one thing I'll say is we joked about this the other day. I don't even know if it was on camera or not. If he wins a scoring title, I honestly think he is the Wilt of this era. That it's like just this assists become for Jokic it's the opposite, where he's like, oh, maybe I'll have to score this year, so I'll do that. And part of me goes, are we sure he won't win Defensive Player of the Year some year?
That's so crazy. That's as crazy as I thought Jokic winning an MVP in 2019 was. I'm not going to rule anything out, man. I can't rule anything out with this man. He's ridiculous. Up next, how should the Nuggets shape the roster going forward this season and beyond? We'll get Adam's thoughts on that up next here on Locked On Nuggets. Second segment here on Locked On Nuggets. Thanks for joining us and making us part of your day. Glad that you're with us for this world's finest with Adam Mares. Really glad to be back on camera and doing a show with Adam. I miss you, buddy. It's been great.
You too, man.
All right. So as we're looking at the Nuggets right now and this season, and one of the things I think is difficult is in the moment to identify what feels like very urgent needs versus long-term roster building. And I'm thinking a lot about this with the teams that I think are kind of ahead of the pack right now, where it's Cleveland, it's OKC. I think Memphis fully healthy falls into that, not because of their superstars, but because how they built the roster in terms of its versatility and what I've started calling optionality. Dallas is, I think, a little bit less so, but it has a lot of like variations of the same theme built in. Boston has some variations of the same thing, even if their central core idea is still, let's shoot more threes than you. I'm looking at all those types of things, and as the CBA has shifted underneath the feet of these teams, and we look at, because I was listening to Hoop Collective talking about this with teams like Phoenix and teams like Miami and teams, all these different squads, Phoenix in particular, where it's just like, it's just almost impossible to have these max contracts. And I forget who it was about, but it was not about Denver, but they were saying you can't have 3 max contracts and 2 of them not play like max players. And I was like, that applies very much to your Denver Nuggets. So my kind of question for you is, I think that this team, the roster long-term needs a transition. I think we thought that it was going to be like the core 4 can run it back over a 4-year span and it's going to work. We'll talk about the Jamal thing in a sec. And it's partial too. I don't know how you kind of extricate it.
You can't.
But from that viewpoint, I would just ask you, do you feel like the Nuggets need to do work to transition to something different along these lines?
To me, I can't separate those two questions, because the answer is, if Jamal Murray is the guy that helped them win a title, then no, they still have everything that they, the style is still the same. It's the Murray Jokic 2-man game, and everything else is like additives to that. You build around it. And that's still on the table. I mean, Jamal Murray is playing a little bit better. It's not crazy to think that he will round back into that form at some point in the next 3.5 months, which is how long the Nuggets have before the playoffs begin. It's not crazy that they can get there. So, but that question to me still is interesting, Matt, because what's happened to this point has not been the Jokic Murray 2-man game, and they have a good record. Not a great one, but they have a good record. And what the game is, if you ask me, the Murray Jokic 2-man game is about on par, if not slightly below, the Westbrook Jokic 2-man game right now. And some of that probably has to do that Westbrook spacing for Jamal does not have the same impact as Jamal spacing for Russ. So there's a little bit of that. What I will say is, when I ask myself this question, what I think about is this year is almost proving that the Nuggets or the Jokic team could win multiple different ways, because they've been so impactful with Russ. And it makes you think, I mean, just as a theoretical, what if you had De'Aaron Fox in that role and you gave some spacing? Like, he's also quick. He also delivers the ball there. Like, would that also work? And I think now we can look at it and say, absolutely. There's a lot of different second stars, in my opinion, you could put with Jokic. The team would change a little bit, and you could build an identity off of that. So I don't think they have to abandon the Murray Jokic 2-man game right now. But I do think that if they do have to, if you get through the season and Murray never gets to that level, I do think that you can look at that and say, okay, there's other things that work, and we just have to change our roster on a fly.
So it's interesting because you're, with Fox, like you're talking about replacing a max player with a max player, which I think is like a tough kind of dynamic to shift it up. I think it's difficult. So I'm more of the mindset of one of these contracts needs to be converted into 3 to 4 players that they need, or 2 to 3 even, I think is fine. It's one reason why, like, I've talked a lot about how great Mike has been, and I've tried to credit Mike on every single show when he's been good, which has been almost every night. Like, I've talked a lot about how great I think not only Mike's play, but his approach has been.
Right.
But at the same time, if we're looking at assets, because I also just wonder this, it's going to be very hard to trade Jamal this summer if they were to choose to do so, which would be such a dramatic move for the franchise. It's going to be hard to trade Jamal. Like, I can't believe I'm saying this, but honestly, like at this point, MPJ's probably got more trade value than Jamal because he's on
shorter contract. Yeah.
Shorter contract. Less
That's
concerns.
crazy. You might be right. I don't know if you are, but you might be right. That's
you might
crazy.
be right. And like the King situation might be a special one where it's like if Fox is like, I'm out. And if Fox is like, oh, I would love a trade to Denver, that'd be great.
And also Sacramento's the type of team that will talk themselves into, well, we're just replacing them with the same caliber player. Like, we don't want to rebuild. We don't want to go slow. We just want to keep this engine running.
Right. And so I think that's all like really complicated. But I think it's kind of true that option is on the table. And like, look, the answer might be like they get to the end of this year and it's so disappointing that it leads to they move on from Jamal and Mike. And that's an incredible amount of change.
Yeah.
I've left the door open in terms of I was beating Ryan over the head with a frying pan about wanting to trade Aaron Gordon. The Westbrook thing has me really curious. I don't know how long the rest of the thing lasts. I don't know if it lasts to the end of the season. I don't know if it lasts until the playoffs. I don't know. I'm not willing to sit here and say that it can't work because I know how good Russ is and I've seen these results and I see how it is different from the other places he's been. I've also seen it be good in other places and then go so bad and so sour. So I'm just like, I don't know. I don't know how this Westbrook thing ends.
Here's the take that I think you're kind of getting towards, because I put this, you and I both can sometimes like, we think a lot. And so sometimes like I put out a tweet the other day that was this. I said, I wonder what the Nuggets would have looked like with Russ and KCP. Meaning take Murray out of the equation and give KCP. And, everybody already went to, Adam, why are you doing this? That's old news. Like, move on. It actually had nothing to do with KCP or reimagining it. What I was really thinking in my head was, what would it look like if you gave Russell Westbrook, the Jokic Westbrook 2-man game, a 3-and-D player, a true 3-and-D player? So you have Aaron Gordon's defense, KCP's defense, Mike and KCP shooting. Now you have good spacing and you have that. Russ isn't as dynamic as a scorer at this stage of his career as Jamal, but he is really good at getting to the paint and getting Yoke the ball. So what would it look like? And I think this is the question you're almost getting at, is if Denver was going to make a move or try to build their roster differently, I look at that and I go, I wouldn't want to bet on Russ at 37 just because you are playing with fire the older you get for a guy and the things run out. But if you were to, in the offseason, move on from a Jamal and try to build, like turn him into Cam Johnson and KCP or players similar to that, right? 2 shooters and a player that plugs the holes. I look at that and I go, yeah, I think that team would be really good. I actually think that version would work. Wes isn't the superstar that's going to get the same thing that Murray got, but you could use those pieces to build around it. And I think it would work. So that it's just something that those are the stakes for this year. And it's unfortunately the stakes once you've climbed the mountaintop. You always just want things to stay the same. But the truth is, I think there's options for Denver in the future to build a different roster using most of the pieces, but maybe changing a big piece.
Where are you at with the Booth boys long term? Where are you at in terms of their progression and how they're coming along and what role you think they have with the Nuggets in the future?
So here's the tough part. I like all 3 of them. I think of the 3, Julian to me is the guy that I just have a hard time imagining is an impact player in the playoffs. You watched that Cavs Thunder game last night. What's Julian's role in a game like that where everything is fast? Execution has to be perfect. So Julian to me is the guy that I just don't buy being ready this year, even though he's had a couple of really good games in a row. I do buy Christian and Peyton Watson, but I don't necessarily buy that Michael Malone is going to be able to work both of them into the rotation successfully. So I look at that and I go, if I were prioritizing it, Christian has a higher floor. Peyton Watson to me represents a difference maker, a championship difference maker on that end. So to me, he takes the priority. I think in a perfect world, they both play on this roster. So you have just all these defensive options you can go to. And then you add a shooter that's basically Julian Strawther, but 2 years from now, a guy that actually you can count on to make shots consistently. I buy that roster. What I don't buy is if you gave that roster. If you turn Julian Strawther into a Corey Kispert or a Cam Johnson, I don't buy that Michael Malone would find the right balance between Peyton and Christian, because we've seen it already. Peyton has been relegated to this bit role, 16 minutes a game, 17 minutes a game when everybody's healthy, and Christian's playing a lot. And I would swap those two personally. So that's what makes this equation kind of difficult.
That's interesting, because I get one of the reasons, and I've mentioned this on the show, my opinion is that Christian is the only player, and I do kind of mean this only, that coaching, front office, and ownership are all on the same page on, except for Yoke. Like, I think everybody kind of agrees Nikola Jokic is good, but like, I think everybody
AG too. But I mean, yeah,
I think AG in terms of like, okay, down the line though, do we want that contract long term, right?
Yeah, but
right now,
but yes.
Yeah, but for sure, I think right now is like Malone loves that he hustles, he does his job, and that he doesn't need to do anything else. Like, you don't need to give Christian touches in pick and roll. You don't need to give Christian the ability to expand his game. He's going to be this guy, except a better version of it for a good 12, 13-year NBA career.
But how much better?
And I don't know. That's the thing, is like, it's kind of like the detail of like, he does make a difference in these little ways. Like, he'll get better at going over screens, and and he might become like a really great shooter. Like, these little things are going to matter a lot, where he's a guy that can help a championship team even more than he has.
I think he's a championship caliber player. Clearly they won one, and he played a role in it. So I think he is that. Absolutely.
But you're right that the ceiling, the difference maker, is obviously, I think, with Peyton Watson, but right now the limitations are also there, where it's like very inconsistent game by game. And I think the bigger thing is just that there's less of I think that Watson is in large part a victim of kind of like that political backbiting.
No question. I mean, no question.
A little bit, where it's like, okay, CB we all agree on, yes. Watson, no. And so there's not that kind of backing. Like, I've said this kind of repeatedly, which is, it does not, I've said this, that because there's been so many calls for Russ to start, like, why doesn't Russ just start over Christian? And I've said kind of consistently of like, I do not think that is what ownership wants, regardless of the feud between front office and coach. I don't think ownership wants that. And I think that that's going to be, I don't know if that means that how ownership will feel about Christian in the future as a trade ship, but I think it's like an interesting question to kind of break down the details of.
Yeah, I agree. I think the best version of the Nuggets has both Christian and Peyton. I just think you need a lot of perimeter defenders in today's NBA, a lot of them. Oklahoma City has a lot. Cleveland has a lot. Boston has a lot. The good teams in the NBA right now have a lot of guys, and I think you need a lot. But you also need shooting. And my fear would be, if you were to be able to make a move that said, say it was Zeke and Julian, maybe Pickett has reclaimed some value, so a team is interested in him. You move those guys, and you bring in one shooter. A Corey Kispert, for example, just a shooting guard shooter. If you brought him in, I would say that's great. Now they have every lineup that they can put out there. You're always going to have two shooters on the floor. You could have two defenders. But my fear would be is instead Kispert would just swallow up the minutes of both of those guys. And then you would end up with both of those guys kind of getting a half measure defensively. And that's where, I mean, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe at the stretch here, everything works out perfectly. But to me, you have to get Peyton ready to be able to handle 30 minutes a game. Not because he'll play it every night in the playoffs. But if you have to, you want to be comfortable knowing, hey, this is a Peyton matchup. We have to trust him to play, and he's going to be out there. And I just don't think that would happen if you were to bring in a veteran shooter and keep both Christian and Peyton. One of those guys, I think, would be cut out of the important playoff minutes.
Up next, let's talk a little bit about the Nuggets this season and their title hopes. Yes, they don't have a great record. Yes, they have some really great wins. Yes, they have a lot of big roster holes. We'll get Adam's thoughts on whether or not the Nuggets can win the title this year by the end of the year. Up next on Locked On Nuggets. Final segment here on Locked On Nuggets. Thanks for joining us. For World's Finest, we're going to try and do this pretty regularly on a monthly basis to get Adam on. And I'm actually going to steal some of Adam's other guys on DNVR because I like talking to other smart people that he has brought on as well. So we'll get lots of
that was me approving of it. I'm not saying thumbs down. I'm saying great,
sure.
Great. This is the Julian Strawther thing to three.
Thing in the third. I still think this team can win a title, Morris. I still do. I still think, even with all the problems, even with all the issues, even with all the dysfunction, I still get to a point where Russ has been good enough, and that's a big question. And like, one of the reasons that I don't want to kind of be like, this is going to be great because of Russ is honestly, I don't want you and I's friend Anthony Irwin filling my text messages with just absolute troll gifts until the end of time, because Lakers fans are so salty about Russ.
They're a little nervous though. They could, they did that timeline where it was like, oh, it's November, come January. It's like, hey, it's January, feeling great.
January. He's doing great. With Russ and what he's brought to the table, Jamal, the progress has been not what everybody has wanted, but Ryan and I've joked about this. He's going to somehow trick his way into 21-6, same as always. Like, he's just going to wind up with 21-6, and it's going to be on worse efficiency, and that's going to be a problem. But as much as we haven't seen enough positive signs to be confident about Murray, I'm also of the opinion of, just as he so suddenly disappeared last year, I think that version of him that killed in the playoffs can reappear. And that team is, as you mentioned, is extremely dangerous. They're doing all this without Aaron, who is a huge impact guy that does all the little things that you need. And Mike's aggression level has been so huge in terms of taking that next step. Like, they're getting better. I said at the beginning of the year, this is going to be rough. It's going to be ugly. There's a shot that by the end of the year, they're the team that they need to be. I don't know what happens between now and the deadline. Maybe nothing. Probably nothing, given their restraints. But I'm still of the opinion that with Nikola Jokic and the spot he's at, that this team still can win an NBA championship. What say you?
I mean, I agree with you. Obviously, you have Jokic. You have the best player in the world. He's capable of dominating any matchup, including Anthony Davis, who I think is the toughest one, including Victor Wembanyama, who might be the new toughest one. He's capable of dominating. So anytime you have that, you have a leg up. I think, first of all, the Jamal question, it's 100%. You start there. The Nuggets cannot win a championship unless Jamal Murray, it looks like what he did in the 2023 run. I don't think there is any combination of things that could happen that's like, Murray wasn't good, but they still won a championship. Has to be him doing that. But if he does, and I think there is reason for optimism that he is ascending back towards that and that this could happen. If he does, now the questions become smaller. I do think that the Nuggets are probably one shooter short. If that's Julian, great. If he becomes that and like is consistent, or he just gets hot for a playoff run, okay, that's the guy. I'm skeptical. So I think they're probably going to have to add a shooter to the rotation, because you are going to have to play some minutes with Westbrook on, Jokic off. And how do you have a consistent 48 minutes with at least two elite shooters on the floor? I don't think you can do that unless you add one or Julian becomes it. And then to me, the next question of this is, well, how connected can the team play? Because they're not very connected right now. They have to get back to that. And Peyton Watson has to become a player. I don't think they can make it through a playoff run without Peyton Watson becoming a guy that is trusted to take on certain assignments. Denver's not going to get lucky for 4 rounds of avoiding like, hey, we just never needed Peyton. There's going to be matchups where he is needed, and he's not ready right now. He's not ready. I think he's 1,000 minutes away from being ready, but you have to commit to that from here to the end of the year, in my opinion.
I agree with you. I just think that it's time to get over that. I do not know. Look, some of it is he didn't come into camp in the shape that he needed to, and with having done the work in the offseason, that's at least like the perception I've been given. Right?
I don't know. What I would say is, and who knows with the players, but what I would say is he was not around the team. He was not around the coaching staff. So to whatever work he did, the coaching staff, and Michael Malone has made reference to this, I don't believe the coaching staff has had the faith that he did those things. And whether he did or didn't, that's how they perceived it, I think, coming in.
Right. And so he gets off and then he gets hurt. And so he's behind. And so he's trying to claw his way back up. I continue to be frustrated by the fact that Christian went through this exact path last year in his second season, and the end result was that we got to All-Star, and then he completely flipped it and was just like, all right, Christian's in, Peyton's out, that's it.
Right.
And I just don't. I continue to be like, is it merit based or not? Like, does the work that you put in matter, or is it just like your whims? And sometimes with Malone, it's just whims. I do think that. I also like. Looking back on it, part of me is kind of like, did they give Christian this opportunity because they looked at the books and realized they didn't want to keep KCP? Like, part of me like really kind of thinks back and is like, is that part of the equation?
Could be.
But I agree with you. You need Peyton's option out. Again, we talked about this for so many years. This is the thing the Nuggets taught me with the 2020 bubble run. You need options. You need choices. You need to be able to solve problems. Yeah. And you can't do it with 6 guys. You can't, not with these 6.
No.
So you're going to have to be able to have guys that can provide different answers to different questions. And Peyton provided some different answers in that Wolves series and never got a real chance to do anything with it. We thought it wasn't a good matchup for him, and I don't think it necessarily was on the surface, but we also think things at the beginning of a series, and then as it shifts, it becomes different. And those things I think are important to kind of remember as well. So I'm with you. I agree they need another shooter. They need another wing. I've been yelling about this. They need a 3-and-D. Like they need one more wing that can defend and shoot.
But do they need that if Christian and Peyton both are playing well? Like if we just do the best version, realistic version of themselves, because I think they're both very good defenders. If they're both the best defensive version of themselves, do they need another one?
I still think you need a guy who has the confidence and experience to take enough threes.
So you need the two-way is what you're saying. You need the two-way kind of guy. Yeah. Because I don't trust them to make shots for sure.
Like, I don't think I've said this before. Like, I don't think Denver needs to be. I've tried to make this clear. Denver doesn't need to be like they're behind and they need to evolve and become what the Celtics and Thunder are. No, like you can beat them with a counter style. You just need to be able to balance it where you're not so far behind in these 3-point frequencies. And if you can also balance it with different things. You can balance it by getting to the line a lot, which is what they've done in a great job this year. Like that's a really good way to counterbalance that is just get to the line and get them in foul trouble. There are counters to this, but a lot of it's like, again, I'll just maintain this. You can't allow a ton of threes and take a few of them. You have to be able to shorten the margin. You can take less than them and you can make less than them. You just can't make a ton less than them. And that to me is like where that extra piece kind of comes in. Look, AG is going to play backup 5 in the playoffs. Everybody knows that. Nobody has an issue with it. Has DeAndre at least made you feel like we might be able to survive 2 minutes to 3 minutes in a playoff series if DJ's got to play? Because he's been better this year.
No, not at all. I will say that he has been really good this year, and I think that I'm comfortable him playing in the regular season. In the playoffs, I just think that would be you might surprise the team. There might be a matchup that you can throw it out there for a couple minutes, but I don't think that is like a game 4, game 5, game 6, game 7 type of thing you can do.
Yeah, for me, it's about like his rebounding is the one thing where he has really great rebounding games, and then he has games where he just can't. He just cannot get enough, and it's a problem.
For me, it has nothing to do with that. You can only play one type of defensive coverage with him. You're going to be in drop, and you might be able to surprise the team for a moment. But like I said, by the time you're in game 3 or 4, every team knows when that guy's on the court, we do this, and there's nothing DJ can do about guarding the perimeter on a pick and roll. There's just nothing he can do.
Who's your favorite Western Conference team to watch that is not the Nuggets this season?
To watch, huh? Let me go. I can never remember teams without looking at them. I've enjoyed the Houston Rockets. Their offense is ugly, but I've enjoyed it. Memphis is super fun. I think Memphis is a really fun team. They have a lot of players that I like. I don't love watching Dallas, but I think they're really good. Hate the Lakers, hate the Clippers. Timberwolves are the slog to watch. Warriors are a slog. Spurs is just Wemby. That might be it. So I think it's really just the top of the league. I mean, Oklahoma City I like watching. They're pretty dominant. I don't love watching Shea draw fouls. It's really like the turd in the punch bowl of what I think is a beautiful basketball team. But I'd say those top 3 teams, Thunder, Rockets, Grizzlies, have all been entertaining to me.
Grade Thunder Cavs on a scale of 1 to 10.
10. That was a great game. I just did an hour with Legler on it.
I'm going to go listen.
Here's the thing. Who is my big takeaway is offense. Great offense beats great defense. We usually think that as KD shooting over with a hand in his face. This was great team defense and great team offense. And the defense was perfect, and yet somehow the Cavs' offense was also perfect, not individually, collectively, and it was amazing to watch.
Okay, that's Adam Mares. If any of you do not, which I cannot imagine, but if any of you do not, you can catch his work over at DNVR before and after every Nuggets game, as well as on the All Cities NBA podcast with Tim Legler. It's a fantastic listen if you love hoops. Adam, great to have you back, buddy. Let's do it again.
Let's do it again.
All right, it's going to wrap it up for Locked On Nuggets. Thanks for joining us. We're going to have Ryan and Swiper going to do a show later on today. That'll be on YouTube and on the podcast. And then this show will be up. And then we'll also do Swipe and Gripe tomorrow. And then we'll have a post-game show after the Nets game. So tune in for all that. Thanks for joining us. We'll see you guys again next time on Locked On Nuggets.